At the heart of the biblical story, we find Naaman, a character who underwent a remarkable transformation. Imagine a powerful man, a commander of an army, respected and feared, but hiding a great secret: leprosy. This condition isolated him, putting not only his life, but also his status at risk. How could a victorious warrior be defeated by disease? This is where the plot thickens. A young slave girl, captured in war, mentions a prophet in Israel capable of healing him. What would you do in his place? Would you stay in your comfort zone or seek help where you least expect it? Naaman decides to act, but his journey is filled with challenges and lessons that go far beyond a simple physical cure. Get ready to delve into a narrative of pride, humility, and faith, where true transformation happens not just on the skin, but in the heart. How can such a strong man become so vulnerable? And what does this teach us today? Stay tuned, because Naaman's story goes far beyond what you imagine. Identity and historical context. Naaman was a prominent figure in ancient Syria, a commander of the army who earned respect and recognition for his bravery and strategic skills. He wasn't just a soldier, his position gave him significant influence in the society of the time. Commanders like Naaman were seen as heroes, responsible for their nation's protection and notable achievements in battles. As a man of high status, he moved in powerful circles, enjoying prestige and honor in his community. However, like many stories reflecting the human condition, Naaman's life was not without challenges. His position as a commander did not immunize him against life's fragilities. There was something that marred his image of greatness: leprosy. This disease, surrounded by social and religious stigmas at the time, made Naaman a marginalized figure despite his fame. Leprosy was not just a physical problem, it was a sentence of isolation, forcing him to live with fear and disdain from his society. Leprosy was seen not only as a physical disease, but also as a sign of spiritual impurity. In the culture of the time, having such a condition implied issues of morality and even divine punishment. Therefore, even as a respected commander, Naaman found himself trapped in a cycle of pain and exclusion, struggling against the negative perception that leprosy brought with it. His identity, which should have been linked to achievements and victories, was now marked by a condition that distanced him from others. Despite his position, Naaman could not escape society's critical gaze. He was a man of war, but also a man of internal struggle, seeking a way to deal with his condition. Leprosy affected not only his body, but also his soul, his self-esteem, and his ability to relate to others. What many didn't know was that this search for healing would lead him to an unexpected encounter that would change his life forever. In this complex context, the role of the young Israeli slave girl emerges as a turning point. She, in her simplicity and faith, would be the key to Naaman's transformation. Through her words, she would open a new possibility, leading him to seek the healing he so desperately desired. Naaman's story is not just about the struggle against leprosy, but also about the search for identity amid pain and rejection. Naaman's disease. The leprosy that affected Naaman was not just a health issue, but a true burden he carried. At that time, the disease was viewed with great fear and repulsion. Lepers were often isolated from society, living on the margins without the support of family or friends. This meant that Naaman, despite his elevated status, also experienced the loneliness and suffering that this condition brought. The weight of leprosy was not only in its scars, but in how it affected his social and emotional life. The social implications of leprosy were severe. As a military leader, Naaman was expected to be an example of strength and courage, but his condition made him vulnerable. The men and women who admired him might now see him as inferior, someone whom fate had punished. This shift in perception must have been painful for a man who had achieved so many victories in combat. What he had built over the years could easily crumble because of a disease that chose its victims indiscriminately. Religiously, leprosy also carried significant weight. In Israeli culture, the disease was often interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. This meant that Naaman was not only battling physical pain, but also guilt and the perception that he might have failed in his spiritual life. Leprosy thus became a barrier not only between him and society, but also between him and his faith. Naaman's life was therefore a constant battle. The pride of the commander was challenged by a condition that made him dependent on others for his healing and well-being. He needed help, which was not easy for someone who had always been in a position of power. The vulnerability that leprosy brought required a kind of humility he might not have been prepared to accept. This internal struggle, combined with his physical condition, formed a complex picture of Naaman's life. And it is in this tumultuous scenario that the young Israeli slave girl enters the scene. Her courage to speak about the prophet Elisha is a reflection of the faith that could change everything. Her testimony, even from a position of disadvantage, would be the bridge that would lead Naaman to a new hope. Thus, Naaman's story becomes a tale of the struggle between disease and hope, pain and healing, shame and faith. The young Israeli girl. The young Israeli slave girl, though small in stature and social position, plays a colossal role in Naaman's story. She represents faith and hope amid adversity. Captured from her homeland, she could have easily been consumed by despair. However, her attitude is remarkable. Instead of succumbing to her situation, she becomes a channel of healing for someone who might have been seen as an enemy. This powerful lesson shows how faith can arise from the most unexpected places. When the girl speaks to Naaman about the prophet Elisha, she demonstrates confidence that defies logic. As a young slave, her voice would typically be disregarded, but her faith empowers her to speak the truth. She believes that Elisha, a prophet of God, can heal Naaman, and this belief drives her to share her message. Her testimony becomes the seed of hope that sprouts amid the Syrian commander's despair. What is even more impressive is the girl's courage. In a world where her position was one of servitude and vulnerability, she doesn't hesitate to speak of someone who could help Naaman. This action reveals not only her faith, but also a spiritual wisdom that transcends her age and experience. She doesn't let her situation hold her back, but uses her position to make a difference in another's life, showing that even the most challenging circumstances can be transformed into opportunities for redemption. Moreover, her story highlights the importance of testimony. The young slave girl doesn't just share information, but infuses hope and faith. She could have chosen to remain silent, but her decision to speak is significant. This teaches us that even in the darkest situations, the light of faith can shine through a single voice. Her words transform Naaman's life trajectory, indicating that each of us can make a difference, regardless of our position. The young Israeli girl is not just a secondary character, she is a catalyst for Naaman's transformation. Her faith and courage remind us that sometimes the greatest changes come from where we least expect. Her testimony is a call to action for all of us, showing that God's power can manifest through anyone who has faith. Thus, Naaman's story, marked by pain, despair, and the quest for healing, intertwines with that of a girl who, despite her fragility, becomes an instrument of hope and transformation. The quest for healing. Naaman, a prominent commander, was not just a man of war, he was a symbol of power and prestige in Syria. However, his life was about to change drastically. Leprosy, a disease that brought not only physical pain but also social stigma, threatened not only his health but also his status. The news of a cure that could be found in Israel awakened renewed hope in him. Thus, he decided to embark on a journey that would lead him to cross not only geographical, but also cultural and emotional borders. It was an act of courage, especially considering the prejudice that often existed between peoples. In his quest, Naaman faced the challenge of leaving behind his comfort and the protection his position provided. He had to gather not only material resources, but also the support of his household and soldiers. The determination that drove him was palpable. Crossing the desert and reaching Israel was a task that required not only strength, but also a willingness to humble himself, as he sought help from a people he often considered inferior. This overcoming of barriers is a powerful reminder that necessity can unite even the most unlikely individuals, regardless of their origins. Naaman's journey to Israel was marked by a mix of anxiety and expectation. He didn't know what to expect, but his heart beat with the possibility of healing. As he crossed the border, Naaman not only physically approached Elisha, but also began to shed his emotional and social armor. He was about to place himself in a vulnerable position, something uncommon for a man of his status. It was as if he was making a pact with his own humanity, recognizing that despite all his power, he was, like anyone else, susceptible to suffering. When he finally arrived in Israel, Naaman encountered a people who looked at him with a mix of respect and apprehension. He, a general, was now seeking the help of a prophet. The irony was not lost on him. What was once a position of authority now made him a supplicant. He was received, but he had to deal not only with the desire for healing, but also with the reality that he was in a territory where the rules and customs were different, and where he might not be as welcome as he expected. This experience of transition is crucial to understanding what was at stake. Meeting Elisha. Naaman's meeting with the prophet Elisha was a moment of great expectation. Naaman imagined that the prophet, being a man of God, would receive him with pomp and circumstance, perhaps even performing a grand ritual to heal him. However, what happened was unexpected. Elisha sent a messenger to deliver the message that Naaman should wash in the Jordan River. This simplicity disarmed Naaman. What he expected to be a great event turned out to be a simple, almost banal instruction. This approach was a test of his faith and willingness to submit to something that seemed so insignificant in the face of the gravity of his condition. Naaman's initial reaction was anger and disbelief. He felt offended that he had not been received personally and by advice that seemed so trivial. After all, he was a renowned man, a warrior who had won battles, and now he was being told to wash in a river. The question that arose in his mind was, why the Jordan? Were there not cleaner rivers in his homeland? This doubt was more than a question about the efficacy of the cure. It reflected his own insecurities and prejudices. This initial resistance is a crucial point in the narrative, as it shows how faith often requires us to set aside our expectations and place ourselves in a position of humility. However, the words of his servants were decisive. They reminded him that if Elisha had asked for something grand, he would certainly do it. Why not follow a simple command? This internal conversation and the support of those who accompanied him were crucial to his decision. This dynamic between Naaman and his servants emphasizes the importance of community and support in personal journeys. Often, it is the voices around us that help us see beyond our own limitations and doubts. Thus, Naaman decided to obey Elisha's instruction. This choice was not just a physical act, but a step of faith. He was about to submit to a ritual that, to many, might seem ridiculous. But in a moment of surrender, he allowed himself to be carried by the possibility of healing. This act of faith is a recurring theme in many religious traditions, symbolizing that often, true transformation begins with small gestures of obedience and trust. Washing in the Jordan. Elisha's instruction for Naaman to wash in the Jordan River brought a new perspective on what it means to obey. When Naaman finally went to the river, he was about to experience not only physical purification, but also spiritual renewal. The Jordan's waters, though simple, would become a powerful symbol of faith. By entering the waters, Naaman was not just seeking a cure for his leprosy, he was surrendering to a process that challenged him to believe in what he could not see. This journey to the river is a metaphor for all of us who are often called to take steps of faith in unknown directions. The Jordan's waters were not just a means to an end, but a reminder that healing can come in unexpected ways. Naaman dipped into the water and, upon emerging, experienced not only the healing of his leprosy, but also an inner transformation. This experience made him realize that healing was closely linked to his willingness to submit to something greater than himself. This lesson is profound. Often, what we need is a simple act that requires faith for us to see significant changes in our lives. It is interesting to note that Naaman's experience in the Jordan also reflects the concept of humility. He, a powerful man, had to strip away his pride and enter the waters of a river he considered inferior. This humbling was a catalyst for his transformation. This narrative teaches us that in our search for healing and growth, we often need to open ourselves to experiences that challenge us to set aside our armors and connect with our human fragility. After the seventh dip, the leprosy disappeared. Naaman not only regained his health, but also his dignity. The act of washing symbolized obedience and surrender to a higher power. This transformation is emblematic of the spiritual journey many of us face. Sometimes, what holds us back is our pride and resistance to submitting to processes that seem simple or even humble. Naaman learned that true strength lies in recognizing fragility and the need for help. Thus, washing in the Jordan became a turning point not only in Naaman's life, but also an example for all who seek healing and transformation. This story reminds us that behind great changes are often small acts of faith and obedience. The Jordan River, which was once just a body of water, became a symbol of hope and renewal, demonstrating that even in the most improbable circumstances, divine grace can work wonders. Spiritual transformation. Naaman's healing was more than just a release from leprosy. It was a true spiritual rebirth. By dipping in the Jordan River, he not only washed physically, but also began to shed his old beliefs and prejudices. The healing experience led him to a new understanding of faith and a relationship with the God of Israel. This transformation was not instantaneous, but a process that involved reflecting on his life and past actions. He realized that true healing is not limited to the body, but also reaches the soul. Upon returning home, Naaman not only carried restored health, but also a new perspective. He became a man who recognized the power of God and the importance of faith. This inner transformation was visible in his actions and attitudes. The Syrian commander, who once looked to the gods of his land, now saw himself before the true God, who makes no distinction between peoples. This new worldview brought Naaman a sense of purpose and a new mission, to share his experience and faith with those around him. Naaman's transformation also symbolizes a bridge between different cultures and religions. His conversion to the God of Israel not only changed his personal life, but also brought a new dialogue between Israel and neighboring nations. Naaman, now a living testimony to God's grace and power, could influence others in his own nation. The idea that even a Syrian commander could be healed and transformed by an Israeli God was a powerful and challenging message. Furthermore, Naaman's spiritual transformation exposes the universality of God's grace. He was not just a foreigner seeking healing, but someone who became part of the divine narrative. This inclusion shows that God's goodness and love are not limited by geographical or cultural boundaries. Naaman became an example of how faith can transcend barriers and unite people around a common purpose. Naaman's transformation is a call to humility. He, who was a commander of an army, recognized that his position and power meant nothing in the face of the need for healing and salvation. By submitting to the healing process proposed by Elisha, Naaman said goodbye to his arrogance and accepted the simplicity of faith. This lesson is a reminder that true greatness often lies in recognizing our limitations and opening our hearts to divine action. Impact and legacy. Naaman's story resonates not just as an individual tale, but as a collective testimony about faith, humility, and the universality of God's grace. The transformation he experienced had a profound impact, not just on his own life, but also on the relations between Israel and neighboring peoples. Naaman, now converted, became a bridge between cultures, challenging the notion that faith is restricted to a particular group or place. His example reinforces the idea that divine grace can reach everyone, regardless of their origins. Naaman's legacy is also reflected in how his story has been told and retold over the centuries. He became a symbol of hope for those on the margins, showing that healing and transformation are possible even in the most difficult circumstances. His story resonates with many who, like him, face diseases, challenges, and prejudices. Naaman's testimony encourages the pursuit of faith as a path to inner and outer healing, demonstrating that vulnerability can be a starting point for spiritual greatness. Moreover, Naaman's narrative offers a valuable lesson about the importance of humility. He, a man of power and respect, had to shed his arrogance to receive healing. This change in attitude invites us all to reflect on our own lives and how we relate to others. Naaman's humility in accepting Elisha's guidance is a lesson that echoes through generations, reminding us that we are all human beings, prone to errors and needs. The relationship between Naaman and Elisha also illustrates the impact a spiritual leader can have on someone's life. Elisha, without hesitation, offered Naaman the opportunity for healing and transformation. This dynamic highlights the importance of leaders willing to welcome and guide those seeking truth. Elisha's role as a mediator of divine grace is a powerful example of how faith can be shared and disseminated through authentic relationships. Naaman's story invites us to reflect on how we can be agents of transformation in our communities. If each of us can share our experiences of faith and transformation, we can positively influence those around us. Naaman's legacy teaches us that everyone has a role to play in building a more just and welcoming world, where God's faith and grace can flow freely, touching lives and hearts everywhere. And now, we've reached the climax of Naaman's story. Can you imagine the transformation this powerful commander went through? From leper to healed, from proud to humble, Naaman not only found physical healing, but also a new spiritual perspective. By washing 7 times in the Jordan River, he not only rid himself of leprosy, but also learned to trust God in ways he never imagined. And here's the big question. What does this story teach us about faith and obedience? Have you ever been reluctant to follow a path that seemed too simple or even foolish? Naaman reminds us that often, the answers we seek lie in the simplest things. How many times have we let pride keep us from our blessing? What if we had the courage to take the step that Naaman took? Remember, each of us can be transformed if we are open to listening and obeying. So, what will you do with this lesson today? What steps are you willing to take towards your own healing and transformation? Share your reflections in the comments, and let's explore more about the faith that transforms lives together.